Looking for a guaranteed way to create content that resonates with your audience? Start a podcast. Interview your ideal clients and let them choose the topic of the interview. Because if your ideal clients care about the topic, there's a good chance the rest of your audience will care about it too. Learn more at sweetfishmedia.com.
You're listening to the B2B Growth Show, a podcast dedicated to helping B2B executives achieve explosive growth. Whether you're looking for techniques and strategies or tools and resources, you've come to the right place. I'm Jonathan Green.
And I'm James Carberry.
Let's get into the show.
All right, today's episode is going to be a little bit different than what you're used to. This was actually originally recorded for a new show that we're producing called Boston Success. But I wanted to have you guys listen to this episode before it actually goes live on Boston Success, because the guest that we talked to is someone that's been on B2B Growth before. And he has some incredible content to share. He's in the B2B space. His name is Patrick Campbell. You're going to love this interview. So here we go. Welcome back. We are here today with my good friend, Patrick Campbell. He is the co-founder and CEO at ProfitWell. Patrick, how you doing today, man?
Doing well, man. How you doing?
I am fantastic. So ever since we knew that we were going to do a show based on Boston success stories, you were at the top of my list for folks to have on it. And so I'm super stoked, Patrick, to have you on. I've interviewed you on another one of our podcasts, B2B Growth, and you delivered insane value. So really excited to dive into this. Before we get into your 3 keys to success, Patrick, I'd love for you to just give our listeners a little bit about the journey that has ultimately led you to what you're doing today at ProfitWell.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm actually not from Boston, so I'm a little bit of a poser here, but I've been here about a decade, and to most Bostonians, a decade is definitely not enough to call yourself a Bostonian. So to most people, definitely a Bostonian. But what's kind of funny is I'm from Wisconsin. I'm from a town with, more cows than people. And so, the whole concept of Boston, which isn't a large city, but it's a pretty large city, at least in context of where I grew up. But my background's in econometrics and math, come from a really blue collar family. And, that's kind of where I learned just this, intense gratitude for work, essentially. And moved out here. I worked in DC for a little while, working in the Intel community. And then I worked at Google. And at both places, I was doing just basically econ modeling for different outcomes. At when I worked in the Intel community, I was trying to find bad guys and gals. When I worked at Google, I was trying to find money. And so both places essentially, worked on those types of outcomes. And then I, out of, pure hubris, naivete, ignorance, all of the bad things, jumped into the startup world. It's basically one of those things where I was just thinking, I was like, okay, I need to jump out. And, I just kind of frustrated working for a boss, essentially. And that it wasn't because it was a little bit of ego at that time in my life, but it was also just kind of, I always cared more than my boss. And that's easy to do when you're, a young, hungry kid and you're dealing with people in the corporate world. And that's essentially what the government is in addition to Google. And so jumped out and basically worked at a startup for about a year. That's the first kind of interaction I had with kind of small company or heavy growth culture. And it wasn't super pumped about it. Learned just a lot of what I didn't want to do, learn a lot about that. And it was just a heavily venture-backed company. And I think that the heavy venture backing, which was necessary for the product, it wasn't necessarily the right move for that particular company or for that particular company culture. And so again, just hit me at the right time. I was working on pricing when I was there and essentially looked at how we just don't know a ton about it as just practitioners and operators. And it's something that's extremely important. So put those 2 and 2 together, and then a little bit of hubris, a little bit of ignorance, and just jumped out and started Price Intelligently. And we're now ProfitWell because we kind of expanded into helping subscription companies with a bunch of different things, pricing, retention, metrics, all kinds of fun stuff. And so, yeah, that's kind of the quick and dirty, rambly version of how I got here with a couple of detours along the way.
I love it. I feel like I tell your story often because of really how you've built the business. You guys have bootstrapped. You actually had an April Fool's Day post about raising capital that fooled me for sure. And I was laughing hysterically when I found out that it was got to the end of the post and realized it was a big April Fool's joke. Can you talk to us a little bit about? I feel like in a lot of the startup world, there's it's not even entertained as a possibility to bootstrap something. Can you talk about kind of why you chose to go that path and the success you've seen with it?
Yeah, I think it was a little bit of naivete as well. I think that, when I was at that company that was heavily funded for the revenue that it had, and it had a lot of costs associated, so it definitely needed to be heavily funded. But I kind of jumped out and I didn't know how to raise money. I'd never myself raised money. When I was at this company, I wasn't, part of the leadership team or anything like that. And so I just kind of started grinding and the thing that happens, and it's dangerous in some cases, but it was beneficial in this case, is when you're working on something, you normally do the things that you're good at or the things that you can kind of figure out or the things that you're better at, right? Mm-hmm. And so I wasn't good at raising money, so it wasn't something that I focused on and didn't think that, there's a little bit of an insecurity complex that I have just in general, but that kind of aided in the, we're not good enough to raise money yet. Let's give it another month. We're not good enough to raise money yet, that type of thing. Mm-hmm. And so it wasn't as if I had this giant chip on my shoulder about, how dare I raise money or, money is evil or anything like that. Because as most people know, it's a tool, right? And yeah. I think that a lot of people, they buy the tool a little too early. And what we ended up doing, at least in hindsight, is, just getting into a revenue model where, we could basically reinvest everything into the business. And that's really what we did. And I think that helped a lot because it really put us through the ringer in terms of making sure our unit economics were good, making sure that our team was focused, and we've made every hiring mistake under the book at this point, and we still make them because it's just impossibly hard. But we learned those mistakes really quickly because we just couldn't afford to keep making those mistakes or not fixing the mistake once we made it. And so to kind of answer your question a little directly, we've been completely customer funded. And it's not to say we won't raise money eventually, but the April Fool's joke was kind of funny because we had some inbound from, some growth equity folks. And there was one firm that was just kind of, butt heads. Let's just say that. That's the nice way to say it. And, just respectful of our time. And we're really upfront. We say, listen, we're not raising any money anytime soon. More than happy to, get a relationship going or anything like that. But just to be super clear, we are not raising any money. And they're associates. Normally we've kind of learned to push back on associates, but I'm Midwestern, so I can't be, a meanie or a butthead to people. And so, so anyways, and there was one that was really rude. And so we were thinking of what we should do for an April Fool's joke. And then there were some other pieces in that April Fool's joke about, we made fun of basically our competitors charging for what we give away for free, and not in an egregious way, just in a blog post and a LinkedIn post. And so, that was kind of the impetus for that joke. And all of a sudden we had just a ton of, it was really funny watching the traffic because just every growth equity firm that we had ever talked to was just like 20 to 25 hits. They were forwarding it around, and you kind of got the psychology of it. Someone read it, the headline, and was like, those buttheads, and then forwarded on, and then someone went, oh no, wait, it's an April Fool's joke, and kind of went back and forth. So it was funny, and there's still people who believed it to this day, and so thankfully it wasn't too intense of a joke where we had to fix anything.
I love it, man. So in this show, Patrick, we're obviously going to be focusing in on your 3 keys to success. But before we do that, I'd love to have you, because everyone defines success differently. How do you define success?
Ooh, that's a really tough question. Cause there's so many layers to that. I think, for me, success really comes down to being able, so success, I guess if I had to make it into a pithy cliche statement, really comes down to leaving the company you're leaving, the position in a better place than where you found it. And that's easy when, I was the first person, so it's really easy to do that. But what I kind of mean by that in kind of an extended way is also, making sure that I could walk away or get hit by a bus or anything. And basically the company would go on and not miss a beat. And that, that sounds terrible because, what about, legacy and all this other fun stuff? But that is the legacy is, you're building a hive. You're not building a mirror unto yourself to show how cool you are. And so I think that's what success to me. And I think, creating dope product, creating something that's growing substantially, creating something that's revered by customers, like all of these different things are really, really important. But I think that's ultimately my measure of success, at least in my position.
I love it. So for the next little bit, Patrick, we're going to unpack your 3 keys to success. As we were talking about them offline, you said that your first key to success has been high ROI thinking. Can you elaborate on this idea for us?
Yeah, definitely. So I think there's this conception of do things that don't scale. And that I think is 100% true. And we do that all the time here. But I think that when you're thinking of the order of operations of what you're going to do, when it comes to growth, when it comes to product, when it comes to all of these different things, the ROI of what you're doing is extremely important. So that doesn't mean that you don't do the thing that's going to take you 6 months of non-scalable grunt work. It just means that should be predicted to be something that's going to be high ROI. And I think what ends up happening is people spend so much time on Google search, right? In markets that Google search doesn't matter, right? And so you're spending all of that time doing the non-scalable thing, trying to optimize that particular channel, but it's very clear that that channel isn't going to produce insane ROI in any respect. And so it's not worth the non-scalable time up front to take care of it. And so for us, we think about what are the highest impact things now and in the future. And it's really, really hard to predict. We're not great at, perfect at predicting. I don't even think we're great at predicting, but we're pretty good. And so that allows us, and some of these things are obvious, right? That feature is going to, if it's successful or even if it's half as successful, it's going to bring, better results than this other feature, things like that. And so I think that that's been a really, really big thing for us. And for taking that a step further, I think the other thing is that once you figure something out, you should figure out how to go all in as much as humanly possible, especially from an ROI perspective. So there's certain channels, there's certain things that we do actively that look like they're a lot of unscalable work. And our competitors go, oh my gosh, they're wasting so much time with that. And we go, okay, I'm glad you think that because we've optimized the hell out of that particular thing or that particular channel so that it looks like it's taking a lot of our time. But in reality, it's been outsourced, it's been automated, it's been, a bunch of different things to just make it to be high ROI. Yeah. And I think the only reason we think about that is because we think about growth and we think about kind of what we're doing as, you don't just throw people at the problem, you throw optimization. And people are a really important piece of it and we're hiring across the board. But it's one of those things where, we want people who are, going to be 1 + 1 = 3, to use kind of the old saying. We don't want people who, it's just $1 of their time in and get $1 out because that's not really scaling.
Yep. No, I love that. I love the way that you explain that and having, met a lot of your team being in your office last time I was in Boston. I feel like that is a big part of your culture as I've interacted with multiple people on your team. And so kudos to you for being able to distill that, into the folks that are on your team. Because I don't think that that's an easy thing to distill into culture, and you've done it. The second thing, Patrick, that I want to talk about is servant leadership. This is one that's obviously touched on quite a bit, because it's for obvious reasons, extremely important. But talk to us about kind of your journey with servant leadership, why it's been so crucial to your success.
Yeah, I think it just comes down to, so servant leadership, for those who don't know, basic definition, it's kind of like product marketing or customer success. There's a lot of different definitions, but servant leadership, it really comes down to your entire purpose as an executive or as a manager is to serve your team. So that includes basic things like, hey, if your team's working late, you make sure they get dinner. And if they're going to come in early or something like that, get them coffee, like basic things like that, all the way to, hey, this person isn't performing really well and it's affecting the rest of the team, they have no ability to take care of that person. So you have to either get that person to a good level, or you have to, move that person on from that role or the company in order to kind of protect that team. And this is a really, really big thing for me, because once you realize a company that gets past maybe 15 people, all of a sudden you find that success is no longer predicated on any one human being. I'm going to make some pretty big decisions, but those decisions have to be in a good place where the team supports them, because they're going to be the ones doing it. So that changes how you make decisions, how you communicate decisions, but also they're going to be the ones executing on it. And so you have to know your team, you have to know what's going to work best for them, and you have to serve them in a way that you can essentially make sure that they're taken care of and they're kind of executing on that vision and have alignment towards that vision. So this is a really, really big thing for me, because I'm not, I haven't had 6 exits or anything like that. And so I know, going into this really early on, that it's not like my name or my intelligence could somehow bring forth, the right growth and the right product and all of these other fun things. So I really needed to focus on making sure that, if I can optimize my team in a way that they go somewhere and they're, a 1 to 1.5 relationship on kind of what we were talking about here, I want to make sure they get to a 1 to 5, relationship where, they're producing so much because they're being served in the right way, aligned in the right way, and they're cared for by myself and of course the management team.
I love it. All right. This third one we're going to talk about, Patrick, is subversion of ego. Talk to us about this one.
Yeah, this is a big one, especially for, I don't think this has an age requirement, because I think sometimes, especially like young entrepreneurs, you're like a teenager again, in the sense that you don't know how to act. You're socially awkward. You're kind of like entrepreneurially awkward, because you're kind of like, oh, I have to be the CEO. Well, no one's called you a CEO ever, right? Yeah. And so you're either insecure about that, or you're way too secure with that title, right? And so you're like, I'm the CEO, that kind of a thing. And so I think for me, and, being really insecure teenager and early 20s person, it was one of those things where the ego can be pressed really aggressively in not so great ways. Meaning, someone can take advantage of my ego because I'm trying to, I'm trying to be too big for my britches, or I'm trying to, be insecure about an argument, or not being intellectually honest and things like that. And I've just found that when you subvert the ego as much as humanly possible, to a point, it doesn't mean you're not confident, but when you subvert it from an argument perspective, a feedback perspective, a market perspective, all of a sudden you humbly look at your strengths, your weaknesses, et cetera, and it allows you to make the best decisions, and allows you to, support your team in the best way. So yeah, that's a big thing, I think, because, I meet a ton of CEOs, just nature of the fact that we're a B2B business, and a ton of executive teams. And I've been in so many boardrooms from, helping so many companies with pricing and some of the other aspects of their businesses. And I'm telling you, man, the ones that are heavy ego CEOs, where all the data is pointing them in the face and they still are like, no, I think it this way. Those are the ones that never work out. Yeah. Like those are the ones that we've helped and they've tanked essentially in terms of success.
Patrick, I want to transition into the fast 5 portion of this interview. These are rapid fire questions, but I've really enjoyed asking them. The first one, throw up a bit of a softball. What is your favorite place to eat in Boston?
Oh, this is not a softball. This is a hard one. So Boston's really good. A lot of people don't realize this. Boston's really, really good for like mid-tier food. We do have some really good high tier places, and we obviously have a ton of like lower tier places, but mid tier is really, really good here. If it's just like a regular night, I kind of like Sweet Green, which is, it's in other cities, but I call it the Chipotle of salads. It's basically what it is, and it's just really good ingredients. It's totally overpriced, but probably worth the price, just given the price of, the good ingredients and all that stuff. I think that if it's a little bit of a mid-tier night, I'll go to a place called Red Lantern, which is kind of a modern Asian fusion-y type place. It's like right next to my apartment. It's really good for like sushi and stuff like that.
Love it. Awesome. What is the book that you find yourself recommending the most?
I'm going to go with the more businessy one, just because I think it's the most relevant and most helpful to most people. It's got to be High Output Management by Andy Grove. You got to read that if you're going to manage or operate in a team. It's so impactful in terms of teaching you how to think about problems when they're in a business. And it kind of teaches you critical thinking in the context of a business, which I think is really, really valuable.
High output thinking. I'm writing that one down. What is the number one thing that you're trying to optimize for in your life right now, Patrick?
I think it's health right now. So I have regretfully gained about 100 pounds since the start of ProfitWell. And so that's just because I'm not going to use the company as an excuse, but it's definitely a leading variable in it. So I'm not traveling the rest of the summer unless it's absolutely necessary. I am, taking care, going to the gym every day or committing to that. I'm kind of outsourcing my food so that I'm not, eating terrible food. And so that's a big thing that I'm trying to get in order, because as we get bigger and bigger, the energy levels are going to be, necessary.
I love that. I'm trying to get my health in check as well. And so it's
so hard.
Say that. Yeah, it's so hard. All right. This fourth one, who's another local leader, Patrick, that our listeners should be following?
Yeah, I'm a big fan. There's a couple. I'm going to name a couple, just cause I don't want to leave them out. One, and he technically moved to London, but he's kind of in the Boston ecosystem still, is a gentleman by the name of Paul Farnell at Litmus, or he founded Litmus. It's just one of those salt of the earth guys. They were completely bootstrapped until they raised some growth equity. And he's just the type of guy that the first conversation I had with him, I just asked him, Paul, why didn't you ever raise money? And he went, oh, I just didn't know that was a thing. It's just a guy who's so focused on product and the customer and all that kind of fun stuff. And then I'm a big fan of Chris and Brendan over at Wistia. It's another member of this group that I chill with on the Boston side. And those two are another kind of really focused on the customer, really focused on the team. And I think they're extremely, extremely talented when it comes to kind of building a company, at least in what I think is the right way.
I love it. All right, this last one, Patrick, and you touched on it earlier, but I'll ask it again just in case you want to frame it another way. But what is the legacy that you want to leave?
Yeah, I think it goes back to what I kind of mentioned about taking care of business, taking care of the team and making sure that if I get hit by a bus tomorrow or something else, all of a sudden, the company almost doesn't even notice, just in terms of growth trajectory and all that kind of fun stuff. I think that a little bit more expanded from that, I would really love to leave kind of an industry legacy of having companies stop focusing so much on brute force growth. In particular, because that's really how most companies are growing right now. It's not even that it's not data driven. It's just, it's just, there's no nuance to the growth. And that means there's not a lot of ROI and a lot of the growth that's coming in. And I just don't think that's going to work, based on the data in the next decade or so. So yeah, long story short, I think that's the big thing, to kind of focus on. Or that's the thing I kind of want to leave a legacy on. And of course, that involves pricing and retention and all this other fun stuff.
Love it. Awesome, Patrick. Well, thank you so much for your time today. This has been fantastic. If folks want to stay connected with you or learn more about ProfitWell, what's the best way for them to go about doing both of those things?
Yeah, I would say connect with me on LinkedIn at Patrick Campbell. I'm also Paticus on Twitter. And then yeah, I think those are the two best places. And ProfitWell, just right at ProfitWell.com, or PriceIntelligently.com, which is kind of one of our subsidiary products. Both of those blogs are, we try to keep them top notch in terms of the content, the quality of the content.
And I will also be I'll give you a plug to one of your YouTube channel for ProfitWell is fantastic. And I was actually just wearing the Pricing Page Teardown shirt the other day at a baseball game. So if you're into, if I don't know, I wouldn't have even considered myself a fan of pricing before I met you guys. And I think you guys have done a fantastic job with your media strategy. You've got a few different shows that you're putting out. The one that I love is called Pricing Page Teardown. So make sure to subscribe to ProfitWell's channel on YouTube to follow along there. They've done some fantastic ones. But Patrick, again, thank you so much for your time today, man. This has been incredible and I really appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
There are lots of ways to build a community, and we've chosen to build the B2B growth community through this podcast. But because of the way podcasts work, it's really hard to engage with our listeners. And without engagement, it's tough to build a great community. So here's what we've decided to do. We're organizing small dinners across the country with our listeners and guests. No sales pitches, no agenda, just great conversations with like-minded people. We'll talk business, we'll talk family, we'll talk goals and dreams. We'll build friendships. So if you'd like to be a part of a B2B growth dinner in a city near you, go to b2bgrowthdinners.com. That's b2bgrowthdinners.com. Thank you so much for listening. Until next time.